Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Was grace that taught my heart to feel and raised my fears, relieved. Oh, how precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy it rains, unending love, amazing grace. The Lord has promised good to me. His word, my hope secures. Oh, He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy it rains, unending love, amazing grace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine. Oh, but God who called me here below will be forever mine, will be forever mine. And God, you are forever mine. When you walk into the room, everything changes. Darkness starts to tremble at the light that you bring. And when you walk into the room, every heart starts burning, and nothing matters more than just to sit here at your feet and worship you. Oh, we worship you. Oh, yes. We love you. Oh, we'll never stop. Can't live without you, Jesus. Oh, we love you, Lord. Oh, when you walk into the room, sickness starts to vanish, every hopeless situation just ceases to exist. And when you walk into the room, I know dead began to rise, 'cause there is resurrection life in all you do. Oh, we love you, Lord, we'll never stop. We can't live without you, Jesus. We love you, oh, and we can't get enough. All this is for you, Jesus. I know that your eyes are like flames of fire. I know your head is white as wool. And I know that your voice sounds like waters. Jesus, you're beautiful. And I know that your eyes are like flames of fire. I know your head is white as wool. And I know that your voice sounds like water. Jesus, you're beautiful, and we love you. No, we'll never stop. We can't live without you, Jesus. We love you, oh, and we can't get enough. All this is for you, Jesus. Why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known? Tell me, Lord, what did I ever do that was worth loving you, or the kindness you've shown? Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me, Jesus, I know what I am. And now that I know that I'm needed, you so help me, Jesus, my soul's in your hand. And try me, Lord, if you think there's a way I can try to repay all I've taken from you. And maybe, Lord, I can show someone else what I've been through myself on my way back to you. Oh, Lord, help wasted. It's so help me, Jesus. I know what I am. And now that I know that I need it, you so help me, Jesus. My soul's in your hand. Oh, Lord, help me, Jesus. I've wasted. It's so help me, Jesus. I know what I am. And now that I know that I need it, you so help me, Jesus. My soul's in your hand. Oh, Jesus, my soul's in your hand.
So help us, Jesus. Our soul is in your hands. Father, our entire lives. And Lord, help me this morning to preach this message exactly as you would have it spoken. Let me say nothing more and nothing less. Lord, move in our hearts, move in our lives, move in our church, and move in our world. In your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, if you have your Bibles, you can open them to the book of John. John chapter 18. And we're still in our series of following Jesus. And we've really been kind of going back through this series to find the roots of our faith. And so we're looking past the traditional understandings and going back and finding the historical Jesus and looking at His life and His teachings and understanding what He came to not only show us and to teach us, but to point us towards. He's the way, the path, the truth, and the life. And so this has been a dynamic journey, right? We've looked at Christ and we've looked at several of those around Him. Today, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about truth. We're going to talk about wisdom. We're going to do it in two sections, right? First section is going to be how Jesus is a teacher of wisdom, right? How He is a teacher of the truth, and not only a teacher, but He is the truth. And then in the second part of today's message, we're going to look at somebody who very much looks like us from the biblical story, Pontius Pilate, but we'll get there in just a minute. Guys, in Scripture, there's two ways of living, right? There is the foolish way, and there is the wise way. There is the way of the world, and then there is the way of the Spirit. And so you have two forms, two kinds of wisdom in our world today, right? You've got conventional wisdom and you've got God's wisdom, right? You've got conventional wisdom or God's alternative wisdom, right? And so conventional wisdom is the way that the world and culture and society tells us that we should live. And God's alternative kingdom is the upside down kingdom. It shows us, right, that we should be biased towards the bottom, right? I'm talking about in God's kingdom, we don't seek the top seat of the hierarchical chain of power. Rather, we get low and we serve and we find those who are cast out and forgotten and stomped upon, right? We move towards that. We are inclusive of those who are lost and can't find their ways, right? Two types of wisdom, conventional wisdom and God's wisdom. And Jesus is a teacher, of course, of God's wisdom. And when you read the Gospels, notice this. that Jesus speaks in parables a lot, in aphorisms, like little one-liners, right? I wrote down a few of those one-liners, and they're great. You cannot serve two masters, right? You cannot serve two masters, meaning that you cannot serve both God and the God of this world, which is wealth and possessions. One, you're going to love one and hate the other, right? Jesus says that you cannot get grapes from a bramble bush, right? Or a mulberry bush, as some would say, right? He said that if a blind person leads a blind person, they both fall into the ditch, right? He also says that you strain a gnat, but you swallow a camel, right? This is saying that he was talking about the religious leaders, saying that you guys are focused on the law and the letter of the law and trying to figure out which foods are pure and impure, which clothing material is pure and impure, and the whole time you are swallowing a camel, meaning, and a camel was an impure animal, meaning that your judgmental mind is already corrupting your heart. Jesus, the teacher of wisdom, right? And there's several more. Don't let the dead bury the dead, meaning that there's a way to be alive yet surrounded by dead people. There's a way to be alive in the land of the dead. And so Jesus is saying these things for one purpose, and He's trying to get people to see things in a new way, because how we see things determine what we see. How we see life determines what we're going to see. And so if we see God as benevolent and loving, in the universe as benevolent and loving, then what we're going to see in life are those types of things. We're going to see a world where love bursts through, right? Where compassion shines forth. But, however, if you think that God is hateful and angry, you're going to see life that way. If you think that God is angry at you and that this universe is postured against you, then you're going to look and read into everything that happens to support that false notion, right? You get up in the morning and you can't find your keys, and so you're late for work. You think it's because God hates you or the universe is opposed to you, right? That's nonsense, right? What we see, how we see determines what we see. It can be raining outside today. Here's a great example. It is raining outside. Now, we can go outside and look at the rain and be somewhat downcast, right? If we had a ball game to go to, like pickleball or football or something, and it's raining and we can't play, it's going to be kind of bad. It's going to be a bummer, right? But somebody else in this very same congregation can go outside and it's raining and they're going to be delighted, right? Meaning that they don't have to cut the grass, mow the grass, or they can stay inside. You see, it's all about perception. You can experience the same rain clouds, but have two entirely different views. Right? How you see determines what you see. We're talking about wisdom, talking about the search for truth. We, in this series, what we're doing, guys, we're not just doing an observation of the life of Jesus from a distance, right? We're not just interested in just like kind of being happy and just taking the basics and just the traditional understandings, right? What we're doing here is getting down to the very roots of existence. The very root of our being, the very roots of life, right? This is what it's all about, right? And what Jesus was saying, like He was less interested in what you believe in morals when compared to what He was mostly interested in, which was transformation, which was salvation, right? Jesus was totally turning the kingdom upside down. He's always doing this, right? And so when you live a life that is according to the way of the world, the wisdom of the world, conventional wisdom, it says retain your power. Step on who you need to step on to keep your power in your corner. But God's wisdom, the wisdom of Jesus, says give it away. It's the upside down. It's the alternative, right? Conventional wisdom is about reward and punishment, right? You get what you deserve. You pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You've got a hard turn in life because you deserve it, right? But God's wisdom says something very, very different. Right? It says something very, very different. It says that God moves towards those who are dejected and despised. Jesus says through His life and on the cross, when we love our enemies, when we love our neighbors, that is how we become more powerful than ever by becoming powerless, giving it away. And so when you live a life, we're still in the first section of this message, when you live a life of conventional wisdom, right, it makes sense. You walk out of here today and nobody is going to tell you any differently. You can get all the self-help books that you want. You can watch all the YouTube videos about yourself that you want, how to accrue wealth and power, right? But listen, when you're living according to this system, it's a trap. That system which says that only the righteous will prosper. That system which says that, right, you have to pay it in to pull it out, right? That you have to pay to play. What ends up happening, right? It's a life of limited vision, right? It's all quid pro quo. It's this for that, right? It's I love you as much as you love me, right? It's the conventional way of the world. It's a trap. It lacks vision. It's a world of judgment. It's a world of judgment because you've always got to decide who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, right? And it's a life that's self-obsessed. When you live this life based upon the rules of the world, you're going to be totally obsessed with yourself. How am I feeling? How am I thinking? How am I looking, right? It's bondage. But there's another way to live, right? There's another way of live according to Jesus. It's through His wisdom. Jesus says that watch out for wealth. It's a trap, right? That you can become a slave to an idol. And Jesus is saying that God is gracious and compassionate. When conventional wisdom says you've got to earn it, Jesus says no. He moves toward those who have no ability to earn it. Jesus is saying that God is full of compassion, right? But conventional wisdom says He's only good to those that are good. Jesus upends the entire system, right? He upends it all, right? And the wisdom of Jesus teaches us that this whole life of religious living is about being in relationship to God. It's all about being in a relationship to God. It's not about secondhand religion. It's about first-hand religion. And that's what we're breaking through in this series. We don't want second-hand religion and believe in things just because somebody has told us to believe them. Rather, we are going to believe things because, right, we know that God is truth and that Jesus is truth, right? And so we know experientially, we know firsthand the goodness and the grace and the power of God. We know firsthand that God will walk with you through the valleys. We know firsthand that God works toward reconciliation. We know firsthand that God is a God of love, right? I know that we can remember all the Bible verses, which is great, right? We can do all this and all that and repeat the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed and talk about the tenets of the Orthodox faith. That's fine, well, and dandy, but if your heart ain't connected to God, that's not going to do you any good. It's all about a relationship. It's not about the size of numbers. It's not about the size of a building. It is about the intensity and the sincerity and the honesty of our hearts towards God. Talking about the wisdom of God, right? Talking about that living this way according to the world results in anxiety and distrust. You're always wondering, do I measure up? Do I measure up, and am I putting out enough to receive the respect, to receive the appreciation that I should? It's a vicious
vicious cycle, right? It's a bondage to self. But living from the place of God's wisdom is freedom. It's freedom from self. Now, Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate. Verse 28.
And they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when He indicated the kind of death He was to die. Before we get to verse 33, what's going on? Jesus has been arrested, right? The temple guards, the Pharisees have accused Him. He's been arrested by the temple guards, Pharisees, Sadducees. Just, it's a kangaroo court, right? They've put these charges on Jesus, and it's just, it's nonsense, right? It's a travesty. It's the cruelest thing that the world could do to Christ at the time. And so they were not allowed themselves, right, to go and murder somebody on that day. So what they do, this is the religious system. If you have ears, listen to this. So they said, "We cannot kill this man because we are spotless. We are cleansed. We are pure. So what we want you to do, the way of the world, conventional wisdom, Pontius Pilate, do our dirty work for us." And so Pilate says, "What's going on?" And Jesus comes in to the room. And those weasels, right, they hand Him over. They say, "Here He is. This is the one that's committing blasphemy. This is the one who's heretical," right? And He appears before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor in Judea at that time, because Jerusalem, Judea, was a controlled state of the Roman Empire. Right? And so within this controlled state, you've got the highest in Jewish law, which was the religious law, saying that Jesus is a criminal. We want Him dead, but we don't want His blood on our hands because it would be breaking the law. You swallow a gnat, but you gag a camel. Verse 33. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked Him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you're a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" Pilate is a lot like Judas. They're both hated. If you're familiar with the Jesus story, right? Judas, the betrayer, Pilate, the Roman Gentile governor that convicts, right? That carries out the sentence upon Jesus, right? And so what Pontius Pilate is, he is an archetype, right? Meaning that he represents all of us, a part within all of us that chooses the way of rational thinking over the way of the Spirit. Pilate does what we do a lot of times, looks at the X, Y, Z's, and A, B, C's of a situation, and in this particular situation, imagine what's going through his mind, right? He is in control
of the kingdom, so to speak. And his political savvy, right, has not only got him there, but it's got to keep him there. And while Pilate is there, you've got this disruption that's occurring. And they bring to him an innocent man. And we'll dig down a little bit deeper, but Pilate knows this isn't some other man. There's something unique about him, but Pilate has to navigate. Pilate has to retain his power. Pilate has to stay in the position of authority. He doesn't want to lose votes. He doesn't want to lose any more members, right? He's got to finagle and finagle, right? He's got to ride the waves of public opinion, right? And you can see him thinking, this is exactly what we do every day when we forsake hearing the voice of God, and instead we just rely on our own will, our own intellect, and our own power, right? We start putting 2 and 2 together, and quickly it adds up to 4, 8, and 16. But the whole time, Jesus is saying, like, my sheep hear my voice. Talking about living 2 different ways, right? Pilate is that part of us that lives from the head instead of the heart. Pilate is that part of us that tries to categorize and understand God, right, through various tools and instruments and theological frameworks. But when you live by the heart, when you're Spirit-led, when you're Spirit-filled, right, you go by a different code of conduct, right? You go by the truth, the way, and the life, right? And you can imagine that Pilate sees himself as a good person, right? And no doubt he was. Like, when you read this story, right, you see that, hey, wait a minute, Pilate don't really want to kill this man. You can imagine that Pilate thinks that he is a good person, right, with good morals and good ethics. But Pilate's strength is also his weakness. His strength is also his weakness. His strength is his rationality, right? But it also gets him into trouble because he doesn't use any other source to make his decisions. It's all about a well thought out, calculated move in which he absolutely puts the death knell into Jesus. Or so he thought, right? And so then we see this, that Pilate is carnally minded, not spiritually minded. And during the conversation here, you can sense that Pilate is right on the brink of believing Jesus, right? Look down at verse 38 again in chapter 18. Right, it says this right here, that everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. And then Pilate asked him, what is truth? He asked Jesus, what is truth? It shows that Pilate respects Jesus, right? It's like Pilate is right on the verge of a significant spiritual breakthrough, right? You can see him going back and forth, right? He's asked Jesus, what is truth, right? He's teetering on the brink of giving in, right? He's about to give it in, and he stands for that place inside all of us that wants to know exactly what truth is. Pilate represents this part of us that chooses and desires to know nothing but the truth of reality, the truth of God, and the truth of who we are, right? He represents this part within us, right? And yet Pilate feels that Jesus is innocent. Pilate wanting to know truth, but you can tell that he feels that Jesus is innocent. For Pilate, truth is about facts. For Jesus, it's about spirit. I'll say that again. Truth for Pilate is about facts. Truth for Jesus is about spirit, about the reality of divine being. Pilate's truth is an elementary level. It's a ground floor understanding, maybe just pieces of the beginning of an understanding, right? He wants to know, right, in terms of all of the great knowledge of the world, what is truth? But Jesus, what He's showing Pilate and what He's showing you and I is that truth is spirit. And the truth of Christ was right there before Pilate, and Pilate couldn't even see it. And so Pilate is blind. And if you can imagine, if this were the courthouse where Pilate and Jesus were having that conversation, imagine you in the shoes of Pilate, right? And imagine outside of this church house, the crowds are roaring and chanting, "Give us Jesus! Crucify Him! Crucify Him! Crucify Him!" Imagine all through Lone Valley, from the hills and the valleys, you can hear a distant shouting, right? It's a roar of a crowd. Crucify, crucify, crucify Him. And it's you and Jesus. You can imagine what Pilate must be going through. What's Pilate going to do? Is he going to follow his instinct and his intuition, or will he be politically savvy and give the crowd what they want? We know what he chooses. Option B. He gives the crowd what they want, right? But listen, don't be too hard on Pontius Pilate, because we all do the very same thing. We all do the very same thing, right? We can look and analyze a situation to death, right? Up and down. Never once praying about it. Never once falling on our knees. Never once taking a posture of true humility and asking God what to do, and not filling in the responses for God, but remaining quiet so He can speak to us. Following the Spirit is what we should do, but too often we'll go the path of self-preservation. It'd be really easy for me to self-preserve and avoid some of the tough topics that we've been covering, right? But I can't give my life to that, guys. I can't give my life. I did it for 17 years in active addiction, and then even into recovery. Starting out, right, in ministry, you've got to uphold the image, right, of the good preacher, of the famous, the flawless theology and all of that. But listen, right, none of that matters if you don't have love. If you don't have the Spirit of God, right? That's what it's all about, right? What are we going to do? I can give my life to following Jesus. I can give my life to being bold and radical about His life, teachings, and love, and the Spirit which He's sending out into us right now. But Pilate, man, don't be too hard on him. We all can do that. We can all do that. And we often choose the path of silence instead of speaking up for what is true. We oftentimes would choose the way of the world instead of following the way of Christ. And so you see right here, Pilate is asking Jesus in verse 38, what is the meaning of life? Who is God? What is God? Who or what am I? In this question, Pilate is right there. It opens up a land of opportunity for Pilate to fall face first into the loving embrace of Jesus Christ. But he doesn't pull the trigger. He gets right to the edge. Jesus, what is truth? And then he pulls back. Don't pull back this morning. Next chapter over, 19, coming to an end. Verse 20 and 22, I want you to see something. John chapter 19, verse 20. Many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew and Latin and in Greek. Then the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but this man said, I am King of the Jews." Let's pause right there. We're now at Calvary. And they've beaten and flogged Jesus, right? They've put him through a kangaroo court. They've spat on him. They've plucked out his beard. They've stripped him of his clothes. They took him outside the courtyard. This is right when Pilate says, I'm done with it. He washes his hands, right? He says, Jesus, I'm turning you over to the people that are shouting, crucify him, crucify him. Jesus is taken out from that promenade, out from that place to the whipping post. Cat o' nine tails, a whip, 9 different cords with metal brackets on them lashed into his back. Beaten, flesh pulled off, he's laid on 2 wooden beams that form the cross of what we know now. And they begin to hammer his hands and his feet. And above his head, the religious people that said, we want him dead, we don't want nothing to do with it, but we want the way of this world. The church was calling upon the world to do its dirty work. And here is Jesus, right? And not only do they have him crucified, beaten, and bloodied, but now they want to mock him. And they say, look to the top of the cross, above his head. Why don't you put this sign that says, King of the Jews? King of the Jews, in terms of mockery. They were saying, Israel, you want your Messiah. You think Jesus is your Messiah. Look at him now, bloodied and beaten and nailed to a Roman cross. And the Sadducees and the Pharisees say, guys, Pilate, put this sign up there. All hail, King of the Jews. Have you ever noticed this? Look what Pilate does.
When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each other. One for each other, right? And they also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless and woven into one piece from the top. And let's go back up here to verse 21. And this, remember, it says, the chief priest of the Jews said to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but this man said, I am King of the Jews, right? They did not want it to say King of the Jews, but this man said. And then Pilate answers, what I have written, I have written. Pilate says, what I have written, I have written. Pilate said, King of the Jews, not so-called King of the Jews. Pilate is saying that I have decided, right, that this man that you are killing and murdering very well may be the Messiah that you've been praying for 2,000 years for. And he doesn't go along with it. And so Pilate kind of, you can see here, it's phenomenal. Remember the story of Judas, and a lot of people miss that. At the end, he repented. But Pilate right here is not going to compromise to the church's mockery of their Savior, right? He says, no, I'm not. And so what we see here is something very, very fascinating. Pilate represents for you and I those times in our lives when we need to decide what's most important. What's most important in life, right? Is it appeasing everybody and preserving the self, or is it radically loving others like Jesus does? Is it being aggressive towards someone who offends you, or is it forgiving them and praying for them, right? And so we all need to answer this question, what do I value the most in life? Who or what am I going to serve in life, right? Am I going to serve the culture's ideal of truth, or I'm going to serve this deep sense of truth in the Spirit, right? And so finally, as Amanda, if you don't mind to come to the stage, you and Mike, whenever, the question that we all may ask ourselves is this: what is truth? What is truth, right? What is the truth of God, right? And not only the bigger things, but this question has got to guide us in our everyday life as well, during the small things, right? What is truth? We know that God is truth. We know that Spirit is truth, right? And not only that, to determine how we're going to live our lives on a grand scale, but also in every moment of our lives. Will we always be seeking truth and love, or are we going to go the path of
conventional wisdom, right? The path of self-preservation? Or are we going to go the path of Jesus, which is radically giving your life away, which is radically moving towards others with love, right? When we have those arguments, when we don't quite get along with other people, are we going to be adamant and ardent on proving ourselves right in the heat of a moment, meanwhile forsaking our relationship? Do we want to be right, or do we want to be blessed? Do we want to be right? Do we want to be peaceful, right? And so the question that we're all asked here this morning, what Pilate asked, is what we've been asking. What is truth? Here's the answer. Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life forevermore. He's not an academic concept. He's a living being. And His Spirit is here right now. And when we walk out these doors, are we going to follow His Spirit and live from the place of His Spirit? Or are we going to go the way of conventional wisdom? I think not. I think we're going to choose the path of wisdom, God's wisdom. If you guys would please stand as Amanda sings this song this morning. If you need prayer, please come to the front. The altars are open. If you want prayer personally, I'll pray for you. But this morning, get some things right in our mind's eye of serving Jesus and following Him on His path of wisdom.
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, oh, your grace is more. Where grace is found, I know is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. And holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense and my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Oh, Jesus, you're my hope and stay. And Lord, I